So good morning again. If you don't know me, I'm Reverend Elisha Christopher. I'm the spiritual director here at the Center for Spiritual Living Santa Cruz. I do use they and them pronouns. My ancestors come to this country from all over the world, some indigenous to this land, and the ones that immigrated here we know came here from Ireland, Scotland, Austria, and Holland. And it's a brand new Sunday. It's also a new month. Our theme across Centers for Spiritual Living and our global themes this month is Transcending Purpose, which is going to be kind of fun. We're going to see where we go in our Transcending Purpose conversation. But I want to start this morning with a little story, and there's a story to preface that story, which is that I have a mystery school and a series of classes called Synthesis Collective, which some of you have been involved in. And we have a gathering once a month. And yesterday in our once a month gathering, we were doing some deep storytelling about looking for a narrative for where we are going as a collective, as a society. And there's plenty of stories available to us that tell us the doom, gloom, and the discord, and the separation, and the breakdown. But we also need stories that lift us up, that give us vision, that give us direction, that tell us where we're going. And so we did a number of rounds of storytelling yesterday, and we used the Pixar process. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's a seven prompts that are like once upon a time, and then every day, and then something happened. And because of that, and because of that, and eventually, and then happily ever after. That's sort of the way the prompt goes, right? So we did a number of storytellings, and then we had 7 people come up and just kind of come up in a line, and we just said, the story's going to come through, and we're just going to let it come through one person at a time as we go through. And I want to read you what we came up with, because it's a little fun. So it goes like this. Once upon a time, on planet Earth, humanity found itself in a contracting situation. A contraction of the values of love, of human support, of kindness, and of care for one another. And as the contraction continued, every day the stories seemed harder. There was such despair. It could not go on like this. More news, more chaos, more shaking. Until one day, a group of highly loving people began to tell their stories out loud on a random Saturday in September. They created brand new stories, and because of this, there was a subtle shift in the contraction of humanity. It was a subtle shift, but it was powerful. People began to realize the natural course of life was truly towards the ever-expansion of love. As this group of people met on a Saturday, they looked around and saw other groups gathering on Sundays and on Mondays and on Fridays and every day of the week. And they began to hold hands. They connected. Soon, the whole world was covered by people standing hand in hand. Together, they supported the earth through her contractions. They shared love, resilience, planted trees, and tended the soil. Until finally, the old stories of greed and disconnection fell away. Until the majority of people everywhere embraced the new story, the true story, that we are all one, that we are all deserving of safety, dignity, food, and shelter. This became the new paradigm and the new priority, overtaking all of the power structures of the world. Love and compassion were recognized as the truth, and the new story began to be the only story once again. And ever since that day, all beings began to thrive. Humanity was re-energized by love, and the planet was healed. Yes. And so it is. And I love a good fairy tale. You know, a good story has a happy ending that gives us the trajectory that's leading towards the greater, the good, and the more. Those stories give us maps of how to walk through difficult moments, right? Humans have looked to stories for thousands and thousands of years as the roadmap to help us walk through life. And one of the things that I found interesting about this story that just emerged through our collective storytelling yesterday was this idea of humanity stewarding the earth through these contractions she's having. And we had a little dialogue afterwards that this kind of sounds like a birthing story. That these contractions, these shrinking backs, these closing, these stepping backward, in the birth process, a contraction always leads to the next greatest opening that allows for the birth to happen. And all of the pain and all of the retraction and all of the tightening and all of the frustration that's part of that process is necessary for both the one giving birth and for the one being born. And that whole process is about opening to the more. And if we look to history, sometimes we learn we don't learn from history, but we can also learn that if we look to history, there's things that are available to us. And if you look at the history of the United States, it turns out just about every 80 years, there's been a contraction in fascism. There's been a contraction into power over that has then led to the next emergence of a greater expression of freedom or a greater expression of rights or a greater expression of inclusion in our world. Right? We're just about 80 years from when World War II happened. And now here we are in a contraction again. And so the funny thing about the evolutionary process is I think that this might be how it works. This just might be how it works. That when we are evolving, we contract along the way. That when we move forward, we take steps backwards along the way. And that's true of us collectively as a nation and as humanity and as all things evolving. But I think that's also true in our individual lives. How many of us have ever been in anything we've been experiencing life or we've been wanting to move forward or grow forward or step forward into something, and in the process of moving forward, we find ourselves moving backwards a little bit. Right? Have you ever been there? Right? So clearly there's something here for us, and I think that one of the things that came through in our dialogue yesterday is that when we're moving forward, especially as a collective, we get really inspired and the energy pushes us and we move forward into what's next. But sometimes we might have to take a few steps back to grab everybody's hand so that we can all come along together. Right? And so there's some of us who are running forward into the future and then we're like, okay, we got to go back and get everybody. And I think that happens with our own individual selves as well, right? I know that personally I've been going through a little bit of something recently. Because, there's a version of me that I think that I want to be. There's the person I'm evolving towards. There's the individual who wants to express in a way that's maybe freer than I've ever even known. And I imagine all of us have a version of ourselves that we think we're seeking to become. Right? Does anybody have a you out there that you're trying to get to be? Right? That's part of the journey, right? And I've been working with my therapist and my practitioner and my minister, mentor, and all these people about this person that I'm growing into and wanting to be in the world. And along the way, I keep finding this little old version of myself who just keeps popping up occasionally. My beloved partner's run into them a few times recently. It's like on the way of becoming a person who's visible and impactful in the world and seeks to be inspiring and live into my fullest potential, I also run into the parts of me that are like, well, I'm not worthy. And all the other little stories that come from wherever they came from. And I've been having this realization in my own personal self-work that if I'm ever to fully step into the person that I think I came into the world to be, I can't leave all the old, questioning, unhealed parts of myself behind. That the only way for me to fully become who I'm seeking to become is to take a few steps back and go collect those parts of me that maybe I've left aside somewhere. And say, actually, if I'm ever going to be the person I really want to be, there has to be room for all my parts at the table. And I realize that that's perhaps what's happening for us collectively as a nation and as a human species. That I think we are evolving towards the who that we really want to be. I think that the higher possible vision for the United States of America, for planet Earth, for humanity, I feel like it's on its way, it's emerging, that many of us are looking to the how do we become the who that we want to be, and then the world is giving us all of these contractions. Society and individuals are saying, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And that if we want to move forward and build a world that works for everyone, which is one of our cute little slogans we have here at CSL Santa Cruz, we're here to build a world that works for everyone, right? That's our vision. But if we're going to build a world that works for everyone, fortunately or unfortunately, that means we have to bring everybody with us. Because we can't have a world that works for everyone that's just some people's idea of that world. Right? And so I'm realizing that at least for me right now, the work is often about the vision and where we want to go. But I'm realizing, and perhaps I'm here to remind and invite all of us, that in order to go where we want to go, we have to integrate where we've been. And there's a lot of our history in this country that, just like the previous parts of myself that I've been hiding from me, there's a lot of our history that we've been hiding from us. And that in order for us to create the nation or the world that we want to see, we have to heal the history. We have to acknowledge what has been. We have to recognize what didn't work. We have to find a way to integrate those pieces and those parts so that we can create a greater wholeness that is truly inclusive of all of it, where everyone and everything is invited to the table, and no one and no thing is left out. Yeah. And so I want to invite all of us, because there's only one of us here, luckily, that if we all individually can take on this task of looking at what are the parts of ourselves we need to do a little work on. Where are those abandoned inner children who need to be embraced? Or those traumas or those vulnerabilities that perhaps we've tried to ignore or get away from? That maybe on some level we've got to work on the deep integration. We've got to work on the healing. And that if each one of us is willing to unpack our own history and bring our previous selves with us on the journey of becoming, then we become part of a greater collective who is engaging in that story. And just like in my little fairy tale I read to us when we started, when that group of people started to tell their stories and shift something for themselves, something in humanity shifted. Just a little. But we are part of humanity. And if we do the work and we figure out a way to make it all a little lighter and more integrated for ourselves, then within the collective, it has gotten a little lighter and a little more integrated. Because we are a part of the greater whole. And there's so much out there that needs and wants our attention. There is so much to be healed and fixed and made better. And the more we allow our attention to be pulled outside, the less and less we remember that our work is on the inside. And that everything that's manifesting out in the world, as we know, is a manifestation of human consciousness, of human thought, of that which is moving inside of us. And so each one of us has a little strand in this great tapestry that is the world. And your job, my job, is to work on your strand, to clean up your piece of this puzzle, for me to clean up my piece of this puzzle. And it's been really insightful for me to recognize that as this expanding and contracting is happening in the world, it's also happening in myself. that I'm seeking to become a greater version of me, and all the old parts are coming up because they need to be healed and integrated to come along, same thing's happening out there. There's a greater vision of the world that we want to live in, and in order to get there, we've got to bring all the old pieces and hidden parts along with us and integrate them, because that's where the healing has to happen. And so that's our invitation. That's our work in this month of transcending purpose, right? It's to realize that whatever we think our individual work is, it's way bigger than that. And even those little insignificant things that we might feel like, oh, that's no big deal, yeah, maybe it is. Because maybe wherever the little tiny places we've been ignoring are creating great big manifestations out there. And maybe the root causes might seem insignificant, or like we can just stuff them into a closet in the corner of our consciousness. But really, they're begging for our attention. And I'm recognizing that in my own life, and I think in our collective life, everything that needs our attention and wants to be healed and cleaned up is like showing up all over the place. It's hard to miss. And so let it be an invitation to call us deeper into this healing practice and into this thing called evolution. And let's bring all parts of ourself along for the ride so that we truly can build a world that works for everyone, and each one of us build a life that works for all parts of ourself. So let's breathe that in. And let's just drop in together. As I first just speak a word reminding each one of us that what I know is that there is indeed one seamless presence that is living and breathing throughout the entirety of the universe. That there is indeed only one life that is living in, through, and as everyone and everything. That the infinite one that I call God, which some of us might simply call the universe or energy or consciousness or life itself. I recognize that this one life is unfolding through the entirety of the play on life on earth. And that this one is always evolving, always expanding, always growing towards the more. And so let us remember that that expansion, that evolution, that unfoldment towards the more is happening within each one of us right now. It is happening within our world. And that part of the birth process, part of the growth process, is that as we expand, we contract. As we move forward, we take a step back. But what that means is that we are evolving in a way that allows the whole self to be invited forward. We are evolving in a way that allows the whole of society to be invited forward. So as we are seeking to rush forward into the next and into the new and into the dream and into the vision, and we see parts of ourselves and parts of our society and parts of our families and neighbors, as we see those parts contracting, let us remember that that is our invitation to take a deep breath and to let it out, to slow down, to take a step back so that we can grab hands with those who are perhaps a step or two behind where we want them to be. But we do so with love, we do so with compassion, we do so with gratitude and care, just as we would for ourselves. When we reach into the depths and find those places that perhaps we have exiled or left out, and invite them forward. So let us take this opportunity to remember that even when we feel like we are taking a step back, that even when we feel the contraction, we are being prepared for the next step forward and for the next expansion. And let us know that we are holding this birth process for Mother Earth and for humanity together, and that yes, we might be going through these contractions, but there is something beautiful and new and wondrous that we could not even imagine yet that emerges and is born from this place of integration and wholeness. And so for that, I can give thanks. For that, I can celebrate, knowing that there is something more at work here. And even if we can't see it in the moment, we can remember that the something more is at work. And so let us surrender to that. Let us remember again that we are being breathed by life, breathed by God, breathed by the universe, that we are being lived by the one, by evolution itself. And so from that place, let us just let go and surrender, remembering that we are being held, we are being carried, we are being moved by the current of life itself. And so in that we can rest, we can remember, and let it be. And so it is.